Well, good morning. Happy Monday, September 9th, 2024. Thank you so much for joining me. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fall morning in Vail, Arizona. I very, very much appreciate that you're joining me this morning for the study of God's Word, and I pray that it lifts your spirit. Just a few announcements. First of all, we have a lot of birthdays today. We have, where was it? Right there. Kelsey Smith, happy birthday to you. She was in church on Sunday. She's got lots of exciting things going on in her life. Aiden Williams, Chad Curlin, John Apgar, all birthdays today. So happy birthday to all of you. And I was watching, I don't know if you know this, but as I sit here, I can look out my window right here, and the train is right there because I live right on the train track. And a train just went by. And I've been noticing how many of so I'd say about 90% of the trains that go by, maybe 95% of the trains that go by, they're mostly shipping containers. So they come off the boat in Los Angeles and they get on the train and they end up going by here, going to places east. And they're those huge 40-foot, often 40-foot shipping containers, mostly 40-foot. Sometimes they're 20-foot. And you've got all the big names of shipping containers on these train loads. And then I would say probably about, sometimes it's military. You'll see tanks go by. I know that sounds strange. Sometimes it's wood going by. That's it's got a special train rail car for wood. The wood isn't protected from the rain. I know that sounds strange, but the wood, for some reason, they don't protect the wood from the rain. Sometimes it is covered with plastic, sometimes it's not. But the wood goes by on a train car that's open-ended. It doesn't have it's not in a shipping container. It's actually own car. Sometimes you get coal, sometimes you get chemicals in a chemical car. Anyway, where I was leading with all this is that I've noticed a lot more recently that the shipping containers have been opened. There'll be a train that goes by with maybe, 500 shipping containers on it. And a lot of them are open and the doors are swung open and you can see what's inside these shipping containers, and it's boxes. And I'm sure what's happening is that's in a rail yard and people go in, thieves go in, open up the shipping containers just to look to see what's inside and see if there's anything to steal. And that's unfortunate because that's theft, and it causes the cost of things to go up. Although it's usually, how do I say this? It's usually not stuff, because every once in a while those boxes will fall off, and I like to walk along the train tracks, and was it last month? Yeah, in the month of July, a couple boxes had fallen off, and it was basically calendars, a box full of calendars. And of course, they were wet because of the rains, so they were completely destroyed because somebody opened up the shipping container, and because the train slowed down and the calendars fell out, there was just a box of calendars that were completely useless. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that comes on these shipping containers. It's not like gold or silver or anything that's worth a lot of value. It's boxes of calendars, and because they open up these shipping containers, they get all wet and destroyed. Anyway, other housekeeping items. My father's funeral is going to be Saturday, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, which is the 21st, I believe, at 11 o'clock in the morning. So we'll be going down for the funeral. I believe the majority of my kids are going to be in town and go to the funeral. I'm not entirely sure what that's going to look like and what activities will surround that funeral. I'm very grateful for them to be there. And, they get to be a part of the celebration of my dad's life. I had a wonderful, wonderful, productive, awesome life. He never let the grass grow under his feet, ever. He was always doing something. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but my mother died 8 years ago. He got married 8 years ago. Um, so my mother was 8.5 years ago, basically, and he got married 8 years ago. From the time he got married, he lived in one, two, three, four homes. And each home that he moved into, he completely rebuilt the home. So, and that's what he did in his 80s. So he never let the grass grow under his feet. He was always busy with something. And I remember telling him, I said, Dad, are you done? He goes, yeah, I'm done. This is the last home. And I said, yeah, I'll see it when I believe it. Well, it was his last home. Actually, it's not. Now he's now he's safe with Jesus. He's probably arguing about something, landscaping. Oh my goodness. If God puts him in charge of anything, it'll get done. I'll tell you that. All right. And it's weird how many times over the last week. So he died not less than a week ago. It was last Tuesday. And how many times last week something triggered in my mind, oh, I got to talk to Dad about that. Because we talked all the time. Dad, I got to talk to Dad about that. Well, yeah, those days are over. Yeah, he was a source of wisdom, but more importantly, he just had a lot of really quirky, interesting things that he was interested in. And so I would talk to him about those quirky things. And yeah, so we'll miss you, Dad. Miss those wonderful conversations. All right. So I have a funeral on Friday, and I have a funeral. I'm thinking that I'm not going to need to. We'll definitely meet over the next 2 weeks, but then after that, school will be out for 2 weeks, and I'm sure I'll be taking off a week for the school. We haven't decided which week yet, but as we get closer, I think. Well, let's see. Yeah. I've got one family coming that may come into town the week of the funeral, like on a Wednesday. So I may not do a podcast a week from Thursday. So we'll have to see how that goes. All right. But I'll keep you informed. As of this point, we're meeting for the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to take 1 week off over the next following couple weeks. And let's see, we did the birthdays. All right, so let me just see if anything is exciting over here. Yes, my dad was a great inspiration. He had his checklists and got things done. And I, when I'm not overwhelmed or in a funk, I get my checklists done. But sometimes being a pastor overwhelms you, and I'm not as much of a checklisty person in those situations. All right, so let's get into our study. We are in 2 Kings, rapidly getting through 2 Kings. And what's interesting is that it's the story of Judah and Israel until the fall of Judah and the fall of Israel. And then you get the Babylonian exile, and then you get all these great stories like Daniel or Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, that kind of carry us through this this time period between when Israel and Judah are no longer until the time of Jesus. And we might go through some of those stories. I'm preaching on Nehemiah right now, but I'm only doing a bit of Nehemiah. And it would be fun to do Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther, kind of those intertestamental, and then some of the prophets that lived, Daniel. So we might have to look at that more in depth. I haven't decided yet. Or we may switch it over to the New Testament. I feel like I need to go through one of the Gospels again. I really, really enjoyed Matthew. Like going through Matthew was transformative, just teaching through the whole entire book. It took 2 months to do it, 3 months, but it was phenomenal. And maybe I'll do Luke. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. All right. So we're in 2 Kings chapter 8, and these are the stories at about the time of Elisha. We're learning about. We've been in Elisha for a long time. He healed the Shunammite woman, if you remember that. That was one of the things he did. He just recently lifted up an axe out of the water. People come to him for advice. So let's start reading in 2 Kings chapter 8, beginning at verse 1. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Go away with your family and stay for a while, wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years." The woman proceeded to do as the man of God had said, and she and her family went away and stayed in the land of the Philistines 7 years. So they're in the land of the Philistines. If you'll remember, the Philistines were the nemesis of the Israelites during the time of David. The Philistine land is up against the Mediterranean Sea. It's modern day Gaza. Is that right? Yeah? I've got a map here. Maybe I can pull up this map. Let's see. So here's a map, and Jerusalem is in the land of Benjamin here, but it's actually part of Judah. It's the capital of Judah. So this kind of gives you these boundaries shifted somewhat. But the land of the Philistines is Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, up in this area. So you have this is modern day Israel, includes Jerusalem, right? Jaffa or Haifa now. And so you've got all these lands, but this is the land so she goes west over to the land of the Philistines. And apparently she feels comfortable doing that. And if you'll remember, Ruth went over to Moab. David's ancestor, right, was a Moabite woman. So people, when they left, they typically went to the Philistines or the Moabs or Edom, down here in the Edom, the Ammonites, the king of Ammon or the king of Aram. Those are all the lands that are surrounding. But she went to the land of the Philistines and stayed there for a while. As a matter of fact, she stayed there for 7 years. So she basically avoided the whole entire famine. Now, I don't know if this is the famine that was back in chapter 6. If you remember, there was a famine in the land. We remember there was a siege that kind of created a famine in Bethlehem, or no, in Samaria. That was in Samaria. But famines come and go. But the interesting thing is that the famine happens because according to Elisha, the Lord decreed the famine. So definitely at the time of the Old Testament, whenever there was a famine in the land, they attributed that famine to God. And then God tells Elisha that there's going to be a famine in the land. And Elisha tells the people, okay, God's decreed a famine. If you want to survive, you can leave. And many of the people listened to God and left. But other people did not listen to God. And of course, they're the ones that suffered during the famine. All right. Verse 3. At the end of the 7 years, she came back from the land of the Philistines and went to appeal to the king for her house and her land. So apparently when she left, the king must have taken over her property, which is probably what a king would do. If you've got money, you can survive a famine, and you can go and post guards or militaries or put signs and say, this is now property of the king, and this is how kings become wealthy. And this is how most people become wealthy. Becoming wealthy is not hard. I am so excited. And this is a horrible aside, but I mean, because it shouldn't be in the Bible study, but we're doing, after we finish Nehemiah, I'm going to do I'm so excited about this Sunday morning Bible study that talks about money and wealth. And if you wish to be wealthy, it's not hard. All you have to do is live below your means for a period of time, gain wealth, and then let that wealth gain other wealth. And pretty soon, people who do this become millionaires and multimillionaires. Most people don't do this because they don't need to, right? the only wealth you really need is if you want to live really comfortably in retirement, you can have some wealth there and live. But most people live paycheck to paycheck, which is not necessarily bad, as long as you want to continue working. But the reason why, so it's going to be a fascinating, it is going to be a fascinating Sunday morning series that's going to talk about money and wealth. It's not a stewardship series. It's not. It's kind of, I read this book about money, and it just completely opened up my mind about what God said about money. And I'm just can't tell you how excited about this I am. But anyway, most kings or rulers or leaders were people who were able to save up enough money that when opportunities hit, they went and took advantage of those opportunities. So the king here, right, saw that the land had laid vacant because the lady had left, and she didn't have enough money or resources to kind of hold it in a trust for her. So he went in and took the land. And this is probably what most kings did. They had enough wealth where they could take advantage of huge on fire sales. Basically, it's a fire sale. They were able to go and get taken advantage of that. Anyway, so at the end of 7 years, she comes back, and she went to ask the king for her house because obviously he owns the house. Verse 4: the king was talking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, and had said, "Tell me about all the great things Elisha has done." And just as Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life came to appeal to the king for her house and land. So the king is talking to not Elisha, but his servant. You remember Gehazi was the one that went after the guy and tried to get all of his wealth from him. He brought a tribute to Elisha, and Elisha says, "I don't need the tribute." So he goes away, but his servant Gehazi goes and gets the tribute. And if you remember, the leprosy on that guy has now on Gehazi. So this either happened before the leprosy, or perhaps he has leprosy. I don't know. But Gehazi happens to be in the king's presence when this lady comes to appeal for her land. And so she's coming to appeal to the king to get her land back. And Gehazi is with the king talking about all the great things that Elisha's done. And then all of a sudden in walks this woman, and Gehazi's like, "Wait a minute. You want to hear about the miracles that Elisha is doing? Listen to this." So Gehazi said, "This is the woman, my lord, the king, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life." And the king asked the woman about it, and she told him. So then he assigned an official to her case and said to him, "Give back everything that belonged to her, including all the income from her land from the day she left the country until now." So, man, this is fascinating, hugely fascinating. So first of all, what are the odds that Elisha, tell me about all the miracles that Elisha is doing? And Gehazi says, "Well, let me tell you, oh, wait, here's the miracle right here, this woman. He restored her son to life." And so the king says, "Tell me all about it." And she said, "Well, I was, my son died, and Elisha lay on top of him, and he came back to life." And so told the story. And the king was like, "Wow, this is a man of God." And so you don't mess with the man of God, and you don't mess with the people that the man of God has touched. And so he tells his accountant to go back and make an accounting of all the profits that have made off her land, give her land back, all of her belongings, and the profits from the land, from farming or whatever they did on the land. And so the accountant went back and did that. Now, the other interesting thing is that they had an accounting of it. Just think about that. The king, whenever he would obtain property, he would have an accounting of what property is his, maybe what crops were grown, how much profit he made from it. And this is another teachable moment. And it might explain how the king became wealthy. And the teachable moment is this: that which is measured increases. This was oh man, who was the guy that came up with that principle? It was in the 50s, and he was an economist or a process guy. He was a process guy, leadership and process guy. I guess I could look it up. That which is measured increases. Anyway, he came up with it, and it is a principle that all companies live by. Most companies live by. You have to measure everything. You have to know whether or not you're going in the black or going in the red. And if you're going in the red, you have to shift your what it is that you're doing so that you're no longer going in the red. You have to right the ship, as it were. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. If you take Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey, that's what he says. You just measure your family wealth, and eventually it will get back on track because you're measuring it. Because most people don't measure how much is coming in and how much is going out. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. Because once you see that your income minus expenses is negative, then you will naturally say, well, can I increase the income or can I decrease the expenses and to get back in the black? And this hit home with me when I was reading Rockefeller Rockefeller's biography. I think it was by I can't remember who it was by, but I was reading Rockefeller's biography, and from his whole life, J.D. Rockefeller made an accounting of every penny that he made, and he carried it around in a little book. And if he made money, he would put it in the book, and if he spent money, he would put it in the book. And at the end of the month, he would go back and look at how much he spent. He was fastidious about this. He never stopped doing this his whole entire life. He would make an accounting of how much money he had, how much was coming in, how much was going out. And then he would look at that and he'd say, is there ways that I can change this? Is there a way I can make it more efficient? And he did crazy things to make his life more efficient. And throughout history, when people do this, their net wealth increases. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, it sounds like crazy, but most wealthy people don't inherit their wealth. They just account for their wealth and figure out ways to be more efficient in the wealth that they have. That's it. We'll talk about this later also in this sermon series. So J.D. Rockefeller, who became one of the wealthiest people ever, right? He basically leveraged the wealth that he did have into other wealth, and just was an efficiency expert. It happened to be Standard Oil. But any company that starts, most people are so busy running the company that they never stop and do an analysis of the company, right? And so you end up with money. People who have wealth, they'll come in and they'll buy these companies and they'll take a look at the profit and loss and they'll say, well, this is obviously where we need to change it. We need to do these 3 or 4 changes and then it'll be a highly profitable company. And then I'll sell it off, right? Anyway, so the king, maybe this is how he became king. Maybe he became king by simply having an accounting system which showed him how much he had, how much was coming in, how much was going out. And so when he saw the opportunity, this lady leaves, this Shumanite woman, he takes over her property, gets it for free, basically, and farms it and maintains it. Then she comes back and she wants it back. And he could, I don't think, the question would be, is it really your property? Does the story sound right? Can you verify? Can you bring in your neighbors? I mean, is this truly your property? And if it was, then the king might say, okay, I'll give you the property, but you owe me something because I took care of it for you or something like that. But in this instance, because she was associated with the man of God, he gives the property back. And so he calculates how much he made off the property and gives it back to her. And this is not necessarily a miracle of Elisha's, except that it's a miracle that she survived the famine. She may not have survived the famine, but she went away, survived the famine, came back, and got her property back. And that's good because Elisha was the one that convinced her that she should go in the first place. So that would have been a stain on Elisha's legacy if that had happened. All right. So we didn't get very far. I'm sorry. So we'll pick up the next story, which happens in verse 7 in chapter 8 when we meet again. So let's go ahead and close in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the wealth that you give us. But the greatest wealth, Lord, is your son Jesus and your kingdom. And that we thank you. In his name we pray. Amen. And let's go look over here. Sounds like gaining wealth is like losing weight. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Pearson's law. Pearson? It may be Pearson's law. That's not the person I'm thinking of. I'll look it up and we'll talk about it tomorrow. He's a very, very famous. He wrote he coming out of, so Japan had the efficiency stuff coming out of the 50s. And he looked at what Japan was doing and he kind of brought that to the United States is what I'm remembering. But I'll look it up and see if I can find it and we'll talk about it tomorrow. But anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope you have a great day and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. God's blessings. Bye.